All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's great to see many of you starting to join us. I'm going to put some information in the chat. Please enter your name and county into the chat for attendance purposes. And if needed, go ahead and change your display name and include your pronouns if you're comfortable. While we wait for others to join us, please feel free to stretch, take a few deep breaths, or whatever it might be that can help you be present and prepared for this morning. And welcome to those that are just joining us. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so welcome everyone. Welcome to the Social and Emotional Intelligence Workshop for Leaders, Part 2. My name is Emily Sulpizio. My pronouns are she, her. I am presenting from San Diego on Kumeyaay land. And I'm a training operations manager here at the Academy for Professional Excellence, a part of the Adult Protective Services Workforce Innovations Program, which is also known as APSWI or AppSuite. And I'll be moderating this workshop along our wonderful speakers today. I also want to briefly note that we do have closed captions enabled for today's workshop. So if you'd like to turn captions on, please feel free to select the captions option on the bottom of your Zoom panel. That should be at the bottom of your screen. Also, we sent you all the participant manual to utilize during this workshop, but in case you don't have it on hand, I'm going to go ahead and post it in the chat right now. One moment while I do that. Okay. All right, it should be in there now. It may show as a Drive link, but you should be able to download it. All right, so to start things off, I want to share just briefly a little bit more about the Academy and APSWI. So the Academy for Professional Excellence is a project of San Diego State School of Social Work. Its mission is to provide exceptional workforce development and learning experiences for the transformation of individuals, organizations, and communities. And APSWI, or APSWI, we're a program of the Academy, and we provide innovative workforce development to APS professionals and their partners. And first, I just want to say from all of us here at APSWI, we just want to say we're grateful that you are here today. You all play a vital part in the Academy's mission to revolutionize the way people work to ensure the world is a healthier place. And before we dive into the workshop, I'd like to take a moment with you all to share something of purpose and great value that inspires the Academy's core values and what we represent. While I do that, I'm going to paste a link to our land acknowledgement in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to share with you all a land acknowledgement. The purpose of this land acknowledgement is to recognize the relationship of Indigenous peoples to the land. This acknowledgement of the land is multifaceted in its meaning. First, it shows respect to the people of the land itself, and to the relationship to one another. They are statements that recognize the disposition from the land, the harm brought by colonial practices, beliefs, and policies, and they validate and recognize the continued presence of Indigenous peoples everywhere. Lastly, when offered in earnest and with sincerity, they are the first steps in reconciliation and healing. For millennia, over 100 tribal nations have been a part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the Academy community, we acknowledge this legacy. We promote this balance and harmony. We find inspiration from this land, the land of the original inhabitants of California. So while developing a land acknowledgement statement is an important step towards reconciliation and healing, the statement alone is not enough. It's also important to identify concrete steps and actions that can be taken. These actions can involve putting in time and effort to research and learn more about the Indigenous communities of the lands you're on, perhaps returning artifacts and land to their appropriate tribal communities, or working to protect and preserve the land. You can also use the link that I posted in the chat, which directs you to our website, which lists the many ways you can take action. And thank you so much for participating in this moment of recognition with me. All right. Lastly, I want to go over some technology for all of us. I'm sure we're very familiar with navigating through Zoom, but just in case, I want to go over just a brief audio overview. So for audio, I'm going to start from left to right. Audio is on your far left. You can click the microphone icon if you can get more settings and options there. And then to unmute while speaking, you can also just hold the space bar of your keyboard. And then just a reminder during our time together, as we are practicing mindfulness, when you're listening to others speak, please mute yourself and, of course, unmute when you are about to speak or would like to share something. For your video camera, click the video icon titled Stop Video to share and unshare your camera. We would love for those that can to turn your cameras on this morning. And then if you would like to update your name being displayed or to add your pronouns, you can go ahead and click Participants, hover over your name, select More, and then select Rename. And then we have the chat box. This is where you can share questions, answers, anything you'd like to share if you're not using your microphone. This is also where you can send me a private message if needed. If you have any challenges with tech, please feel free. You can click the drop-down button that says To Everyone and select Emily Sulpizio. And then we have reactions. We encourage you to use your reactions if you'd like. This is where we can express ourselves with a hand raise, a clap hand, or whatever you resonate with. All right, and a couple more things. We will be doing a short live feedback at the end of the day today to gather your opinions on the workshop. So please keep that in mind as you're experiencing today's session. And then lastly, I'm sure we likely will experience some technical glitches. Likely that's inevitable in our tech world. So if that happens, we just ask for your patience and understanding. All right, thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Dawn Gibbons McWayne.
Thank you, Emily. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you and to see your friendly faces out there. I'm Dawn Gibbons McWayne. I'm the program director for our Adult Protective Services Workforce Innovations Program, otherwise known as AppSuite. My pronouns are she, her, and I am coming to you from the land of the Piam Luiseno people. You are well supported today with by members of our AppSuite team. I'm here, Megan, our Leaders Institute coordinator. You've met Emily and Callie, our training operations supervisor. So we're all here from the AppSuite team to help support you and help support our amazing presenter, Sayori, today and deliver a really wonderful workshop. So you're here today for our APS Leaders Institute workshop on social and emotional intelligence for leaders. This is part 2. The goal of Leaders Institute is to support APS and adult services leaders and to help you enhance your capacity to drive program improvements. So as such, again, today we're presenting the second part of this series. Part 1 was delivered back in April, and then we're delivering part 2 today. Part 1 was recorded, as is today's. Thank you, Megan. So Megan just dropped the link in the chat to part 1. So if you missed that or are looking for a refresher, click on that link and you can find our Leaders Institute playlist, and the recording of part 1 is there. Soon we'll have part 2 there as well. Our wonderful, wonderful presenter is back with us again today for part 2, Sayori Baldwin. Sayori will be leading us into a deeper exploration of elements of social and emotional intelligence that impact our ability to lead. And this is an especially important workshop. These skills are especially important right now, given the really challenging and tumultuous times in which you are leading. So hopefully this will be providing you with some good content and good information that you can use moving forward. In terms of the agenda for today, next slide, please, Emily. We're in the welcome and opening remarks portion. And in just a moment, we'll be moving into the workshop with Sayori. The workshop will include a brief break. And after Sayori's presentation, we'll have a Q&A session and then debrief the workshop. And as always, and as Emily mentioned, evaluation. We like to get your live feedback right here while we're all together and it's fresh in your mind. And then there will also be a link for an electronic evaluation. We value your input, we use it, we review it, we take what you tell us and then make adjustments for the next time. So we really do want to know what works well, the parts that you want to see continued, and the parts maybe that were a little bit rough or something that you'd want to see changed in the future to get us. Oh, with regard to Q&A, if you have a clarifying question, if there's something that you hear Sayori say and you're a little bit confused about it, or you have a question about that specifically, go ahead and put your question in the chat and give us a heads up that this is a clarifying question. So it's something that we'd want to ask Sayori right now. Otherwise, again, after Sayori's presentation, there will be time for Q&A. And so we would ask you to hold any other questions for until that time. Now we're going to start to get into it. To get us started, we've got a poll. Callie or Emily, will you launch the poll? The poll has 7 questions. So we're going to ask you to do 2 things. One is answer the questions here on the poll. There are 7 questions, so you're going to need to scroll down to the bottom. Please just use your first reaction, your gut reaction. Don't overthink it. So please enter your responses here on the poll. This is anonymous. We don't know who's saying what. We're just trying to get a sense of within the group, where do people fall? And then in your participant manual, you've got handout number 1. It's on page 11. You have these polling questions on that handout. And we're going to ask you also just jot down your responses. You're going to be using that later on in the workshop and so for some additional learning. Good, we've got some answers coming through. Again, remember there are 7, so scroll down to the bottom to answer all of those questions and then make note on your handout of your answers. So we have not, okay, we just passed the 50% mark, so we've got a little more than half have responded. So keep those responses coming in. We're at 66%. If you haven't answered, please do. We're looking at the areas of, do you receive regular feedback, recognizing my emotions and the impact, I'm attuned to the needs and emotions of others, understanding how to maneuver through the political environment, managing stress and maintaining composure under pressure, building trust and strong relationships, and handling conflict constructively and seeking win-win outcomes. Looks like most people have responded. What do you think, Kelly and Emily?
We give it another minute. I think questions 1 and 2 are answered, and then I think folks are still working on 3 onward.
Thank you. If you've just joined us, we've got a poll up, and we're asking folks to answer all 7 questions in the poll itself on your screen, and then also to jot down your answers on handout number 1, which is on page 11 in your participant manual. You're going to be using your answers to those questions for some additional work, some additional learning.
And just a reminder to make sure to scroll down. You're likely only seeing the first 2 questions on the poll, and there's 7 total. So just go ahead and scroll through.
How's it looking, Emily?
It's looking about the same. We're strong, 100% response in questions 1 and 2, and then drops off a little at question 3
Okay.
forward. But
Well, go ahead.
I think we could probably wrap up the poll.
Okay.
All
So
right.
take your last moments and put your any last minute, and we're going to go ahead and wrap up the poll. And while we're doing that, I would like to introduce Sayori Baldwin. Sayori is retired after 35 years of service with Riverside County. with Riverside County. Sayori was an assistant county executive officer, and now we are so fortunate, works in consulting, which is super lucky for us. So Sayori is doing these workshops for us, consults with other agencies as well, is a trainer for our Leaders in Action program, and we're just so very pleased to have Sayori Baldwin back again with us. So over to you, Sayori.
Thank you. Thank you. As we're wrapping up the poll, I wanted to, first of all, start off with a very special thank you to the Academy. Don, you and your team, you all are amazing in terms of focus on the important things that need to happen in order to support not only the workforce, but individuals who are vulnerable in the adult population. And so thank you for keeping this subject at the forefront. Leadership is all about influence and building highly effective teams. In your adult services program and as leaders, I'm keenly aware of the challenges your programs face. In your complex and interdependent world, more than ever, emotional intelligence is not just a nice to have, it's a leadership imperative. It shapes how you lead under pressure to include decision making, how to inspire trust, how to build strong cultures, and how you bring out the best in others, but importantly, the best in yourself. I talked to someone just recently about self care, and they told me that in the world that you all work in, work life balance is an oxymoron, and sometimes it does not exist. And so when I think about social and emotional intelligence, and I say importantly, it's about bringing out the best in yourself, the question really becomes for you is how do you become an effective leader? And it's all about that oxygen mask principle that you have to take care of yourself before you're able to effectively take care of others. So thank you for taking this time out on your busy schedule to learn about this important topic. And with that said, Megan, can you give me and all of us some of the things that stood out in the poll?
Hi, Sayori. Can you hear me all right?
I can. Thank you, Megan.
Terrific. So we've got a very positive set of results from this polling. For question one, let me just repeat it really quickly, that folks received positive or regular feedback from team and bosses about leadership effectiveness and how behavior is perceived. Just 5% strongly disagreed,
Okay.
and 10% disagreed, whereas 71% agree or strongly agree. And for question number two, again, most people agreed with the statement that they recognize their emotions in real time and the impact on others. Let's see if I can do my math really quickly. 81% either agreed or strongly agreed with that. And the rest of the folks, 19%, were neutral on that question. For question three, attuned to the needs and emotions of others, was a little bit more mixed. 83% either agreed or strongly agreed, 12% were neutral, and 6% disagreed. Understanding how to maneuver through the political environment. This demonstrates a lot of folks feel confident here with, again, 81% or 83% agreeing or strongly agreeing and 18% being neutral. Question five, managing stress well and maintaining composure under pressure. This group seems experienced, and 63% agree and 19% strongly agree, with just 19% being neutral. And for the question relating to building that I build trust and strong relationships. We've got 82% agreeing or strongly agreeing, 6% being neutral, and 13%. I mean, this is interesting that here's where you've got a few folks saying that they disagree with being able to build trust and strong relationships. And finally, handling conflict constructively and seeking win-win outcomes. Folks were again very positive here with 82% agreeing or strongly agreeing and 19% reporting being neutral there.
So thank you for that. And these are interesting poll results because normally when I ask the question about receiving feedback, individuals usually don't receive regular feedback about their leadership effectiveness. And so kudos to the individuals who receive regular feedback, because when we talk about self-awareness, it really is the cornerstone in terms of feedback. And then the political environment, some people say, Sayori, I just want to come to work and do my job. And if I didn't have to work through the politics, it could be personnel issues or working, with a diverse group of people. Individuals say, I would be good if I can just focus on serving the programs that I'm here to service. And so great results. And what I will say and where I will start this presentation is that self-awareness begins with taking a look at yourself as a starting point and then receiving feedback from others. So if your colleagues, your bosses, and your individuals took this same poll about you, would they say the same thing? And then what you would do from there is fill in the gaps. And so thank you for taking the time to do that. Next slide. Okay, so the agenda for today is as follows. I will provide a high-level overview of Daniel Goleman's 4 domains and 12 competencies of social and emotional intelligence. You will understand how to achieve greater self-awareness and values alignment, the importance of building highly effective teams. We are going to spend the bulk of our time together understanding the dynamics of self-awareness, particularly as it relates to leadership blind spots. Self-awareness is the foundation of social and emotional intelligence. There is way, way, way more material in your PowerPoint slide deck than we will cover for your continued learning and support. I've also included an SEI developmental worksheet and a resource guide in your package. And then finally, I will touch briefly on emotional intelligence specific competency of building relationships with the mindset of, if we build effective relationships, we all win. And the reason why I focus not only on self-awareness, but on relationship management, because the higher you go up in your leadership journey, technical skills is not the determining factor of your success. And then when I think about your adult protective services programs and the limited resources that adults have available in order to be stabilized, you have to rely on relationships that you build with other departments, with other entities, in order to ensure needs are being met. Relationship management also is just the cornerstone of the things that we're going to talk about today in terms of our own self-awareness and our thoughts and feelings and our behaviors and how we show up as leaders. If we can manage relationships well, we will be less, what I want to say is sometimes miscommunication occurs regarding who we are as leaders and our intentions. But if you can build strong relationships, people will give you, as a leader, more grace. Next slide, please. Based on my experience as an assistant county executive officer and also the director of social services, when I look at the careers of leaders, and also with all of the research shows that a significant percentage of leadership derailments are linked to the lack of social and emotional intelligence, with estimates often cited in the range of 70 to 90%. Goleman's 4 domains and 12 competencies are as follows. It all starts with self-awareness, how I feel. This is the ability to recognize our own emotions and how they affect your thoughts and behaviors. Great leaders are tuned in to their inner signals, are achievement oriented, have a positive outlook, and they know their strengths and their limitations. I know that, for example, I am very intense, but I also think I'm the nicest person in the world until somebody reminds me otherwise. The next domain is self-management. What should I be doing as a leader? Once you are aware of your emotions, the next step is managing them, staying in control, especially under pressure. It's about being adaptable, achievement oriented, staying positive. Leaders who master this domain are calm, reliable, and resilient. Have you ever wrote an email that you regretted sending, or speak too much or spend too much time thinking about a policy or a decision that did not make sense when you knew your time should have been spent looking for solutions to implement or present? And then you have social awareness, which is empathy. From a leadership standpoint, the question is how do you make people feel? This is the ability to understand the emotions, the needs, and concerns of others. It includes empathy and organizational awareness. Leaders strong in this area can read a room, pick up on social and political cues, and genuinely connect with the person across at all levels. When I think about reading emotional cues, I remember being in a meeting with one of my directors, and we had an individual who was pretty offensive and talked very negative about one of our human services programs. So we had in the meeting, a number of people, and the director kept raising her hand because she wanted to correct the false statement that was made about the department. The individuals across the room that were at a higher level didn't even recognize her as raising her hand. Some of you all may think, well, that's disrespectful. But my whole thing is I sat next to her and I'm tapping her underneath the table to explain or to give a cue to her that this is not the time to talk or defend. And so, how do you read the cues in the room? And do you understand what culture looks like within an organization in order to be effective? The final one is relationship management, and this is social skills. My question for this and what your mindset should always be as a leader is how can we all win? This is where all the domains come together. It's about influencing, coaching, resolving conflict, and building strong teams. Leaders who excel in this domain create trust, collaboration, and a sense of shared purpose. Ask yourself, is there a person or a department that is a challenge that you should establish a relationship with to improve outcomes? Leadership is complex given the dynamics of working with people. Mastering these 4 domains will improve your leadership effectiveness. So let's talk a bit about the most basic needs of people in the workplace. Next slide, please. The concept of psychological safety was introduced by Harvard Business School professor Amy Edmondson. After a series of studies in the workplace, she found that psychological safety is the belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideals, questions, concerns, or mistakes, and it is foundational to create highly effective teams. It's about fostering an environment where people and teams feel safe enough to take personal risk. It is a proven driver of learning, innovation, and long-term organizational success. Next slide, please. How we sometimes show up to work and manage ourselves. The leader at the head of the table makes a difference in terms of mood, culture, psychological safety. Think about all of the meetings you attend. How many of you guys like meetings? Just give me a reaction so I can ensure that you are awake and you are here. How many of you like attending meetings? So think about all of the meetings you attend. Some meetings with the same subjects rehashed over and over again. Have you attended meetings in which you were excited or fully engaged? What kind of meetings do you go to and you go, "Ooh, this is my 7th meeting for today, and I am so excited to be there to contribute to the good of making decisions"? Or on the opposite side, did you not speak up because you are tired of talking about the same subject with no resolution, or didn't feel valued, or you didn't think your input mattered, or you were just scared to speak up? I remember sitting in with the manager at a manager's meeting and asking a question. Out of 40 managers, I received 2 responses. After that meeting, a manager says, "Hey, Sayori, can I meet with you? Because I want to provide some input about the question you asked." And I said, "Why didn't you say anything during the meeting?" And the manager said, "I'm a new manager and I was afraid to speak up because other people have more experience than I do." Think about an environment in which psychological safety does not exist. People go into survival mode. This is what it looks like. No one wants to look unknowledgeable, so they don't ask questions. No one wants to look unskilled, so they don't speak up or they hide. No one wants to feel unwelcomed or rejected, so ideals are not offered. No one wants to appear negative, so they don't critique or question the status quo. What does your environment and engagement look like in your organization? And how do you contribute to the mood as a leader, as an employee, and as a colleague? So on the right-hand side, I have relevant examples. And when I think about meetings and overall engagement, if you look at your particular environment, what percentage of people speak up? Is it less than 20%? Is it 40%? And I understand personalities because I always have a lot of opinion and a lot to say. But when I think about when I used to attend meetings, there would be 3 or 4 of us speaking up. And then when I would leave the meeting, my colleague would say, "Thank you for speaking up during that subject. Thank you for representing us." And my question always was, "Well, why didn't you all speak up?" Because I'm not sure. I don't want to always seem to be the person who appears to be negative. And so I'm like, please speak up and don't let me be the only one. So when I think about meetings, I also think about the dynamics of just leadership in general. So you as the boss may lead a meeting and feel vocal. But if your CEO, if your CAO, if your director is leading the meeting, what is your level of engagement and what type of input are you providing? So if you leave that meeting with the higher ups and you didn't say one word, you have to ask yourself, what is my engagement and what is the reason why I did not participate? Some of you may take the easy way out and say, well, there was nothing for me to say, or the meeting was just about providing the director providing information. But if you're being asked a question and you do not provide input, you have to ask yourself, what is my level of engagement and why am I engaging or not?
Sayori, you're getting some feedback in the chat about meetings.
Okay.
So to the original question about, do you like meetings? Quite a few sometimes. It's okay, depends on the topic and attendees. Often, if it's relevant to work, it's okay. And then in terms of participation and, does everyone participate? Is it just the same people all the time? Some feedback about, it does always seem to be the same folks participating.
And I'm just curious, why is that? And thank you, Don. Why is it the same people participating? And are you the same people that participate? I'm just curious. And so I always use this 80-20 principle. I think I used it in the last session. The 80-20 principle is just economists studied the distribution of wealth in Europe. And what we knew the answer to that question is, 20% of the or 80% of the wealth is owned by 20% of the people. And it just caused a big other study, and it's called the 80-20 principle. 20% of your personnel problems or 80% of your personnel problems is caused by 20% of your people. If you look in your closet, you wear 20% of your clothes and shoes 80% of the time. In meetings in general, 20% of the people talk 80% of the time. But if engagement and thought provoking, innovative things are going to happen, we need everyone to participate. And so that's why I think this slide is important, to make sure that psychological safety is not occurring. And this is the reason why you don't have a larger participation number. But if you are the ones, again, that are not participating, we need your thoughts. We need your brilliant thoughts about how we can improve the overall effectiveness given your scarce resources. That's what your program does the best, because you all have always operated on, we know the population of adults continues to increase, but the demand for services also increased, but your funding levels have not kept pace. So you all have had no choice but to innovate and also collaborate with others in order to be effective. But in order for that to happen, we need you all as leaders to provide the most input, because you are the ones who do the work in order to improve how we deliver services with the least amount of resources. Next slide, please. Creating an environment in which psychological safety exists begins with your leadership, your influences, and continuing to assess, how do I feel? What should I do? How do they feel? And how can we all win? I want to be clear that psychological safety is not about being nice or not holding staff accountable, because the art of leadership is about how do you hold people accountable for the work and make them feel valued at the same time. That is the most difficult thing to do in leadership. Next slide, please. A couple of reminders. The higher you promote into the organization, not only does your perspective change, but leaders tend to receive less feedback and also listen less, usually because you've been there and you've done that. In addition, the reality gap widens as a result of the leader moving further away from the employees who actually perform the functions. Listening isn't just about gathering data, it's about building trust. The higher you promote, the more you need to listen to what is being said and what is not being said. Next slide, please. One last reminder before we get into self-awareness. John Maxwell says, why you lead and the way you lead are important. They define you, your leadership, and ultimately your contribution. I'm just curious, every now and then, have you sat back and asked, wait, why are we doing this? Sometimes things just don't make sense. So given my intense style, and I can only imagine your magnitude of work, the pressure, the challenges, the changes, and the political environment, I had to remind myself regularly why I do this work and what my leadership impact looks like. As a result, in my career, I carried reminders in my phone, especially I would look at them when I was having a bad day and I just have to laugh at myself about some of the things that I did. Okay, a picture of a child licking ice cream. During an individual conference, a team member told me, Sayori, I used to be intimidated by you until I saw you in the parking lot. You spilled ice cream on your blazer and licked it off. That's when I knew you were human. Sonogram picture. During another individual conference, an employee thanked me for caring after providing her with very difficult feedback. I genuinely wanted her to succeed. She told me when she first met me, she did not think that I cared because at an all staff meeting, she showed me her sonogram picture. I responded, oh, and turned away. I should have responded, ah, and engaged her in a conversation about her excitement. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. Maya Angelou. A picture of a customer. While doing a ride along with the social worker, a child goes into her bedroom and changes her dress. She comes out and whispers in my ear, my mom is going to get mad at me because this is my only church dress, but I want it to look like you. And she held my hand. That broke my heart. Finally, someone took a picture of me wiping off a consultant's shoe after a team building hike. He was so uncomfortable with me cleaning his shoe. I also cleaned some of my staff's because we walked through the mud. I'm a servant leader first, and I'm here to serve others. That is my leadership motto. Without the people who do the work, none of us can be successful. Are you all clear about your leadership why and your impact on others? And then finally, ask yourself, would your staff say that you are a servant leader? Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to start with self-awareness. And like I said, this is where we are going to spend the bulk of our time. And I'll give you the reason. So let's start with the definition. So let me just slow down. Okay, so all the questions that I just asked are foundational concepts of self-awareness. Self-awareness is defined as recognizing and managing your emotions and their impact on self and others, your team performance and engagement. If you want to lead, you must start by leading yourself. As we discussed, you are going to face challenges at work, and you are facing challenges at work. The largest challenge is leading self. Give yourself grace. Here is the problem with self-awareness. According to organizational psychologist Tasha Eurich, is that 95% of people, when surveyed, think they are self-aware. However, only 10 to 15% truly are. So let me say that one more time. 95% of people think they're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% truly are. Do you guys think that number is high? Because I looked at, when I looked at some of your polling questions, you understand your emotions. Um, you recognize your emotions in real time. You understand how to maneuver through the political environment. You manage stress well. You build trust and trusting relationships. And all of this are cornerstones of self-awareness. And so tell me if somebody can say a couple of things in the chat about, do you think the number is high that 95% of people, when surveyed, think they're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% of us are fully self-aware of our leadership impact on others? No thoughts?
We've got one comment. No, most people are pretty arrogant.
Agree. And again, for arrogance for me is defined in my world as a leader is I do think, I understand that I'm extremely intense. I know that I have very strong body language. I have a direct way of communicating with people, but I'm going to continue to say, I think I'm the nicest person in the world in terms of my interactions with staff until I hear otherwise. And believe me, when I get my 360 back, I hear otherwise.
There's more coming through the chat. People feeling like, yeah, that sounds about right. I don't think that many people are self-aware. Um, if you think you're self-aware, even if you're not, how would you know unless it's pointed out in a constructive way? Somebody acknowledging, I know I'm not self-aware. Um, we only know if our sense of self-awareness is accurate if we ask for honest feedback. Without input from staff, it's difficult to know how we're impacting them. Um, I know more about myself than other people, and I'm aware that I need to build better relationships. So
Okay.
that's what's coming through in the chat.
Well, thank you for that. Okay, so one of the main reasons self-awareness is difficult to develop is because we all have blind spots. That's why it's called a blind spot, because it's a blind spot. One of my favorite books written by Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen it's called Thanks for the Feedback, The Science and Art of Receiving Feedback Well. Feedback is any information you receive about yourself. The authors describe a blind spot as something we don't see about ourselves that others do see. They go on to say, there's a gap between the self we think we present and the way we see us, or the way others see us. We may not recognize ourselves in others' feedback, even when everyone else could agree that it is conventional wisdom about who we are and how we are. Leaders often develop habits and thought patterns that become automatic. These blind spots may make it difficult to recognize their own weaknesses and biases. As leaders, these blind spots can impact our decisions, our teams, and our ability to adapt. Recognizing and challenging them is essential to leading with clarity and integrity. Before I go into the details of understanding blind spots, I'm going to start with a case study to illustrate my point. Next slide. I'm going to have you, I think I may have missed the slide. We can click through that one. Okay, so this is where we are. So bear with me on this case study. I worked with a direct report many years ago who held a high-level position. I'm going to call her Baker. You see the cookies in the middle of the table? Baker was high, she was a high achiever, very productive, analytical, and would jump through hoops to get the job done. With these great characteristics, what do you think Baker's team consistently said about her? Well, Baker's 360 assessment revealed year after year that Baker's team thought she was smart. They also thought she was fun at times. However, quite frankly, they were sick of her because she was difficult and under pressure, she was impatient and condescending. This feedback was extremely hurtful to Baker. Baker worked extremely hard to change this negative perception, and her goal was to convey respect. I've never seen someone try so hard to improve her leadership and fail so hard at the same time. And when I say she tried very hard, Baker would do things like I would tell her during the Microsoft Teams call. So what I would do, you know how you introduce a subject that people don't agree with and you can see them put their head down or people start, turning off their camera. So I would take a picture just for her to pay attention to the reactions from her team about how they were taking in not only what she was saying, but how she was saying it. And so she would record herself and we would sit down during individual conferences to talk about it. And so we would look at the recording and she would say, Sayori, why can you say things? But when I say it, it's a different story. So when I said this person really did the work to improve her leadership, I had a tremendous amount of respect for her because she really wanted to be the best leader that she could be. However, Baker was old school and felt people needed to come to work and do their job. I mean, that's reasonable, right? How many of you as leaders feel like people need to come to work and they need to do their job? She thought her staff at times were lazy and did not go above and beyond. Empathy was not at the top of her list, and leadership distance was part of the hierarchical culture she grew up with. She had an open door policy, but no one came to see her because she was impatient when she was asked questions. Next slide, please. Stone and Heen created a concept called the gap map. The gap map helps us understand the various factors that create the discrepancy between the way we want to be seen and the way we are actually seen by others. As we go through this gap map, think about a challenging situation. It could be an assignment, a person, a team. I will continue to use Baker as an example. So when I say think about some of your challenges, so for me at work, I had a couple of pet peeves. I'm a data person, and my pet peeve was I expected directors to come to meetings and understand their population. I wanted them to understand their staffing levels. I wanted them to understand the number of people on leave. I wanted them to understand their budget because I thought that there was no way that I could advocate as an assistant county executive officer unless people understood certain things about not only their workforce, their attrition rate, their population. And when it didn't happen, sometimes the frustration set in. And so I knew what my pet peeves were. I knew what my body language was after every intense meeting that I attended. I sought feedback, even at my level, regarding my effectiveness. I wanted to know, how was my body language? Was I positive? Was I negative? What could I have done better? Because I knew how my thoughts and feelings would move how I was seen as I interacted with others. So this gap mat really starts with, what are your thoughts and what are your feelings? So that's number one. So in Baker's situation, Baker focused on meeting the deadline and was thinking, we need to move faster. So let me back up. I'm sorry. So in this situation, Baker was leading a project with tight deadlines. How many of you all had lead projects with tight deadlines? She had every intention of being a strong and supportive leader, someone who could drive performance while encouraging the team. I don't know too many people who come into work as leaders and say, I just want to make my entire staff mad, or I don't want to meet this deadline. And the same thing with employees. I don't think employees come to work and say, I don't want to make my boss mad, or I want to make my boss mad today. And so she had good intentions. So let's start with number one, my thoughts and feelings. Baker focused on meeting the deadline and was thinking, we need to move faster. We can do this. I need to keep the pressure so we don't lose momentum. Baker's feelings were a mix of urgency, responsibility, and she was not 100% confident in her staff's ability to drive performance like she did. Baker felt like if she didn't push, the project would fail, they would fall behind, and she would be failing her team. So that's Baker's thoughts and feelings. And I don't think that those feelings are unusual. Okay, so number two on this continuum is, what are your intentions? Baker's intentions were positive. She wanted to help the team succeed. She genuinely believed she was motivating them. But here's where the gap opened up. My behavior. What is your behavior when you have certain thoughts about individuals, projects, and let's say it's a negative thought? You may have good intentions, but how does your behavior show up? Baker came across very differently in her behavior. She was sending late night emails, following up several times a day, and jumping into discussions with strong opinions. She wasn't listening as much. She was trying to move things, but in doing so, she ran over people and she micromanaged them. The fourth box, my impact. So, what is your impact when your thoughts and feelings don't align with your intentions and then you put your behavior out into the world? My impact. Baker's team members became quiet in meetings. Some avoided her. One brave colleague finally told her, honestly, it feels like a big truck just ran over us, and we don't feel trusted. For Baker, this was a painful realization in terms of her organizational effectiveness. What story, finally, are they telling about me? But let me just start off by self-awareness and the story that Baker was telling herself. What Baker told herself was she had to push hard because she cared and she did not want her team to fail. However, she never stopped to ask, what story did her staff tell themselves about her? And their story was, we don't like her as a boss. I asked Bruh, so fast forward. I'm walking down the hallway after meeting with Baker, and I asked Baker, how's the project going? And Baker says, Sayori, the project is going well, and we are moving it along, and staff are engaged. I walk down the hallway. My basic question is, how was your day? How was your project going? I asked staff, what do you think staff said? It's terrible. And so when you look at the two insights, and I never understood, and this book is why it's my favorite book, that I read several years ago, it just helped me with insight because when I would sit down to talk about how do we build a highly effective team, and Baker, let's say, would do some team building exercises with her staff. Some of her staff thought she was manipulative. Some of them thought she was untruthful because she felt everything was going well because she had the most positive intentions. And so some of you all may think, hey, Sayori, this is an extreme example. But if you break it down to, let's say that you had one of your worst personnel issues in your career and you were attacked by an employee in terms of your overall supervision, and you now have to sit down. So this employee goes to HR about you to say that you're unethical and you play favoritism. So after hearing this from HR, and now you have to have an individual conference, your thoughts and feelings are, my gosh, I don't think that this employee was truthful. But your intentions are, hey, I'm a leader and I have to be above ground at all times. And then you're sitting in this conference and this employee says one thing that gets on your last nerves that you don't think is truthful. You may roll your eyes and your behavior may show up in a different way. And then you're back at HR receiving another complaint because the impact on the employee is that you rolled your eyes and you were disrespectful. And this is the story about you. This is the one thing that I see happen all of the time. And where we think we are hiding our thoughts and feelings, it will show up somewhere, particularly if you have some intense conversation. And so where Baker was pushing and pushing and pushing, she didn't think she was pushing. She thought she was motivating staff. And the questions that you have to ask yourself as a leader is, first of all, what am I thinking and feeling about the situation, the event, or a particular person or a department that I have to work with? What are my intentions? And again, we show up to work to be positive and to make a difference. I don't know people that come to work to say, I'm going to show up and I don't want to make a difference. As a matter of fact, I want to make everybody mad. And then how are you showing up? And what impact are you actually having on people? Listen to what others are experiencing. That's where real leadership begins. So tell me what questions you have. Any questions? Any thoughts?
Sayori, there were two things that came up in the chat. One was a comment about it's difficult to control body language, and that's something I've heard you talk about that you're very aware of with yourself and managing your body language and how you come across. And then there's a question in the chat about wanting to understand more about asking for feedback. Do you ask after every meeting or monthly or quarterly? How do you ask? Who do you ask? Do you do it in a group? Do you do it one-on-one?
No, so and I should have did a better job with it. Thank you for asking the questions in the first place. But feedback is defined on any information that you receive. And so there's both formal and informal feedback, and we're going to unpack that in a couple of minutes. But in my situation, because I knew that, first of all, my 360 was very consistent. One of them, of course, was data. And throughout my career, I saw an executive coach, and he would always remind me that it always has to be dialogue over data. So I would get in meetings and, I would have, for example, managers complain about certain things. I already knew what their data was. And so I would disregard unconsciously some of the things that individuals had to say based on what I knew about performance data, and it was the wrong thing for me to do. So my coach would say dialogue over data. Now, did I go in and go, how was your day? And let's talk about some of the things that is important to you. But I will tell you, under pressure, you default back to what you know best as a leader. And that's why it's so important to ensure that you have these reminders. So feedback. I had a assistant for years that I took with me from different departments. And the reason why she was so important to me, because she was extremely honest. She would say, Sayori, people don't think that you're available all of the time. Sayori, when you said this during the meeting, did you see that it was a pretty negative comment? So I knew that she was always going to be the one to, provide me with feedback. Now, for my bosses, I thought it was important because my goal always as a leader is to, relieve any of the pressure or the work on them. So I didn't want the board calling them about me. Anytime I knew that I was going to be in an intense conversation, for example, in Riverside County, we are working hard to stand up an integrated services delivery system. And when you have so many departments and they have mandates, they have goals with scarce resources, and you're working to get individuals on board, they're all in, but they can't figure out how to manage it given all of the things they're required to do. I knew it was going to be a difficult situation. And so, the relationships were so important. So I wanted to know what my impact was after that meeting. And then the people that I needed to establish a relationship with, I would meet with them before the meetings, I would meet with them after the meetings because it was extremely important. And so, but again, with the understanding with psychological safety, who's going to tell the boss that they stink? Who's going to tell the boss that they're condescending when they're not in a safe environment? So it's important that you create this environment. Somebody said respectfully, hey, I've had people tell me things about myself that was not respectful. And you know what? Any feedback is feedback in terms of what your impact is. And we're going to talk a little bit after the break about what are some of the things that block us receiving feedback, and so feedback, put together a formal process if you don't have one with your boss about your effectiveness. What I tell folks is for individuals that are looking to promote within their career, after the interview is not the time to get feedback. You need to know today if you're interested in a position, the things that your bosses think is important that will improve your organizational, your leadership effectiveness. And that's where feedback is so important. So for me, it's body language, but there's tone, there's other things that impact you all in terms of your effectiveness that you should be very focused and intentional about in terms of asking specific feedback for specific feedback. I'm sorry. I see a hand raised, and thank you for that.
Yes, Sayori. So I just wanted to go back to because I asked that question, getting feedback.
Mhm.
So if we don't have a staff like you have that you can move, go forward with, who gives you honest feedback about how the rest of the team viewed, the way you led the meeting or how they, their perception of how they heard you. Again, how would you say that we move forward? Do we have to ask at every meeting? Um, yeah. Or do you ask them one-on-one if you don't have this particular honest staff who will come and directly share that with you?
Yes, and again, thank you for the question. It is really a work in progress and it is a fluid process. And so, for example, if you have staff and you have not created a relationship with them, you can begin by asking for feedback, but they may not feel safe to provide you with feedback. But I think it's important as you begin to establish a relationship with your staff that you do ask, what can I do to meet your needs? And for me, it's always been, what can I do to help you feel safe and participate? But again, when I got this intimidating style, do I expect people to be honest? No, so you have to ease your way into, what these feedback sessions look like. And as you grow your relationship with people, they will become safer to provide you with feedback. So sometimes it's in a group setting, sometimes it's an anonymous, survey. Individual conferences is also a way to do it. So there's a variety of ways. But I think it's important in terms of feedback, you're not just listening to what people are saying, you're also listening to what they are not saying. So that whole silence in these meetings, the question I started off with is, why aren't people participating? And if you ask the general question, what do you all need in order to feel supported? And they're not answering your question, you have to just wonder, why aren't they answering the question? The easy way out is for you to think maybe just they don't know what they need to be supported. And if that's the answer, they should be telling you that. Does that make sense? And did I answer your question?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think part of it too is the culture since COVID and people working remote. Things have changed in the way people come and share with you, give you feedback, or the fact that people want to work more independently and not be working as a team to engage and come into the office. So people like their space.
Yep.
It's a very different culture than 10 years ago or even 5 years ago before COVID. So I think we also need to recognize that everyone wants to have more freedom to be able to do their own thing, working out of a house rather than coming into the office. So that kind of changed the dynamic and interaction.
I absolutely agree, and that's one of the things that I worried about. I absolutely appreciate that we have the opportunity to telework, and it took us a while to get there. But I also know, and what we learned during COVID is that we are meant to connect with others. And if you look at the research and the polling questions, what it says is that individuals are less likely to leave a job if they have a relationship with their colleagues and their bosses. And so, research also has said for a long time, particularly Gallup, is that people don't quit jobs, they quit their supervisors. If they have a colleague that they can run things by, if they're having a struggle, they're more connected. But if you're not connected to anything, and if you look at this new generation, and I just wonder how do these youngsters just go from job to job to job and survive? Because again, I worked for 35 years and I've stayed at the same company for 35 years. This new generation is a little different. And so we do have the responsibility to offer them incentives, and telework is one of them if we can focus on the customer with the understanding that engagement is so important in terms of employee retention. And so you as a leader have to figure out in this Microsoft Teams telework environment, how do you develop relationships with your employees in order for them to feel connected, but also supported? Yep. Okay. There are three dynamics that amplify how we see ourselves and how others see us. And Dawn, before I start this new subject, how are we doing with time? Is this a good time to break before we start?
Yes, yeah, this would be a perfect time for a break. Thanks, Deori.
Okay.
So with that, let's take a 5-minute comfort break. Ooh, quick math. 20, 21, 22. So please come back at 10:22. We'll see you in 5.
Thank you. Can't. Your leaky face, we convey tremendous amount of information through our facial expressions. Who can see your face? Everyone. Who can't see your face? You. Your face is a blind spot. So much is communicated through facial expressions. Most humans are good at reading other people's faces since the beginning of time. Humans succeeded because we learned to collaborate and communicate and read people unconsciously. We make smart guesses about one another. Am I threatened? Do we feel threatened? Do I feel appreciated? We developed the theory of mind with who we interacted with. Science writer Stephen Johnson says, we measure other people's mood by scanning people's eyes and the corners of their mouth. For me, what I'm known for is I can read a room and I can read people very well. Like I said, however, I have strong body language and unfortunately, always see it. The second one is your leaky tone. Our tone of voice conveys a surprisingly amount of information about our feelings that can be heard by others, but we can't hear ourselves. Others get messages not on what we say, and we always know it's how you say it. Think of an opera singer on stage, surrounded by music, by drama, by power, and yet they can't hear themselves the way the audience does. The same applies to us as leaders. We may not hear the full impact of our tone, but others do, loud and clear. Let me also say something about tone. Tone is not just the tone of voice. Have you ever sent an email to your boss and didn't get a response right away? Some of you may have gone into the settings to see if it was opened. The easy thing when we talk about email etiquette is don't do exclamation marks or all caps. But people read into who is CC'd on this email? Is my colleague trying to tell on me? But just think about your staff. You write them an email, you guys get hundreds and hundreds, some of you thousands of emails, and your employee tells you something, you may give a quick thank you or a short answer, then they read into it regarding why was their answer so short or why did it take so long to respond? All of these things are really about tone and how we set the tone as leaders. The third one is leaky pattern. Your leaky patterns. It's easy to understand the subtle things we fall into in terms of blind spots. The easy thing for me to comment on is rolling my eyes. But what's surprising is sometimes we are unaware of the seemingly obvious big things. We all have patterns. How we respond under pressure, how we treat the person who disagrees, how we react when things go off script. These patterns leak out over time and they become your leadership brand. If your pattern is reaction, people learn to hide problems. If your pattern is silence, people stop seeking your guidance. But if your pattern is empathy, domain number 3, accountability, and clarity, your team learns to trust your presence even in uncertainty. In a leadership position, your leaky face, tone, and patterns are magnified. So if you compare yourself to staff, that leaky face tone, and even think about, a lot of us are responsible for facilitating meetings. And again, for me, my pet peeve, you guys are going to say she has too many pet peeves. Data, not being prepared. The second one was being in a meeting and we were not solutions driven. We spent a lot of time complaining about, whatever, it could be a policy or whatever the situation was. And I wanted people to come to the meeting with recommendations and resolutions. And so my leaky face, my leaky tone, and my leaky pattern, where I can sit there, and one of the things I would have to tell myself, because I know I have a lot of opinion and a lot to say, is Sayori, when your staff comes into a meeting and you're discussing something, you got to give yourself a 10-minute rule, 15-minute rule, 20-minute rule. You don't always have to jump in. Okay, so I write down a reminder to myself, do not speak for 20 minutes. But of course, I was speaking because of the leaky face, the leaky tone, and the leaky pattern. And where I think I'm being silent, what I will tell you is that everybody watches the boss. All of your research says that even when the boss is not speaking, people see my little stank attitude. And I have to continue to work not to offend anyone. But I also didn't want to be that's just Sayori. Sayori just rolls her eyes. Sayori just has that tone of voice. Sayori just pushes hard in data just because that's who she is. And so, you don't want to be that's just her. Some of you guys have employees that, speak up and say negative things and get the reputation over time. And you say, oh, that was just so and so. She didn't mean anything about it. That's just her. Don't be that Sayori. Okay, next slide, please. Well, no, I'm sorry, same slide. Any questions about leaky face, leaky tone, leaky pattern?
There was an acknowledgement in the chat by someone of realize like I have a totally leaky face, and it's hard to control that. So that awareness of I know I have a leaky face, and I know it's hard to control it.
Absolutely. Yep, we absolutely do all have some degree of it. Some people do it better than others. And so for me, I'm going to continue to say I'm the nicest person on this earth. I've gotten better over time until somebody tells me otherwise. But I know that I have to consciously continue to work on it. Okay, so here is the issue at the bottom. I recognize yours, Sayori. Oh, that's terrible. That has to be Riverside. I'm sorry. I do apologize. I should have apologized to Riverside up front because they had to bear my leaky face, tone, and leaky pattern. Okay, so there are three dynamics that amplify how we see ourselves and how others see us. We'll start with at the bottom, emotional math. Emotions play a huge role in the gap between how others see us and how we assume we are seen. We subtract emotions from the equation. As a leader, we tell ourselves, and I will tell you, this is what I used to tell myself as a new leader, that emotion is not a big deal. So if somebody asks a question and they ask that same question for the 10th time at the meeting going on 1 year, I'm thinking maybe I have a slight sigh, like, didn't we discuss that last meeting? And it's a sigh. So here you go, leaky tone, leaky face. I'm thinking I'm better than what I usually am. And as a new leader, my thought used to be people need to stop being so sensitive. Slight rolling of the eyes. I didn't really roll my eyes. And I did roll my eyes maybe a little because I'm a thinker. And so I didn't really roll my eyes. I was just thinking about the comment. So for staff, as it relates to this emotional math, for us, we sometimes minimize this leaky face, leaky tone, leaky pattern. But for staff, they magnify it times 2. So you can be in a meeting and all your staff rolls their eyes. But when you do it and it appears to be directed toward them, it's magnified 2 times. So you may think that you made a small comment. They may categorize your small comment as an outburst. So understand as a leader, the emotional math, you subtract, they double. And so that's why it's extremely careful that you pay attention to what this looks like in terms of leaky face, leaky tone, leaky pattern. It's not just part of their story. What it becomes is the heart of their story. Situation versus character. If I am part of something that does not go well, let's say I'm working on a project and it does not go well, I may blame the situation on my actions. On the other hand, let's say that you have an employee and their project doesn't go well and you're evaluating them. Others may attribute my actions to, or you may contribute their actions to their character. Okay, here's another pet peeve. Again, you guys are going to think I have a bunch of pet peeves. When we moved into this Microsoft Teams environment, I just wanted to start meetings on time. So everybody logs in. And if you're 5 minutes late, that meeting started, right? And just think about what it looked like in in-person meetings. In-person meetings, because the engagement happens, you show up in the meeting at 10 o'clock and it's an in-person meeting. You all are speaking to each other, you're hugging each other, you're catching up. Someone may bring cookies. In a Microsoft Teams meeting, it was just a different environment. So for me, in both settings, I just wanted people to be on time because, like everyone, I was in meetings back to back to back to back. And what also happened during Microsoft Teams meetings is there were no breaks. You were in a meeting at 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. The next meeting started at 11 o'clock because no one was going to give you didn't have to go anywhere. So they just said start, 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 start. And so one of my pet peeves was starting meetings and people attending meetings on time. And so here it is. I may see you as being not a respecter of time because you showed up to the meeting late. Not being a respecter of time is character. You may be juggling 5 things at once. And so it's situation. So situation versus character. When a person takes a personal day, you may say unreliable. That's character. They explained that they had to arrange for alternate transportation for their sick mother because the transportation company did not show up. That situation. So the difference is an alternate way of telling a story. So when we talk about self-awareness and we judge people based on their intentions, what is the emotional math that we subtract and we double? How do we tell ourselves a story about situation versus character? And then finally, we talked about intent versus impact. We judge ourselves by our intentions, while others judge us based on our impact. I meant to do a good job. I care for people. I wanted to make sure that our team looked good, so I pushed them. Even great intentions can result in negative impact, and this creates a gap between your story about me and the story I think is true about me. So, what do I do about all of these gaps, discrepancies, and incongruencies? How can I get a clearer and more accurate view of myself? And this is what somebody asked the question of, hi, or how can I receive feedback? What forms of feedback can I receive? And so let's, before we go there, next slide, talk about some of the things that impact how we accept feedback. But before we go there, so if I had to summarize, I'm saying as a leader, we have to pay attention to our thoughts and feelings, our intentions, our behaviors, how we show up to the world. And then I'm saying, hey, pay attention to the leaky face, leaky patterns, leaky tones. And then now I'm saying, hey, you got this emotional math going on, and everything you do is magnified compared to the things that your staff do and say to you. Then we have, impact versus intent, situation versus character. Some of you all should be asking, well, darn, as a leader, do I need to be showing up as a robot? Because I think sometimes that's how we feel, right? That first of all, we're told, hey, leave your emotions at the door, check them at the door. You're a leader, you always have to be at a higher ground. It doesn't matter what people say to you, if you're insulted, what staff say, if it does not feel like you're making progress, check your emotions. I'm absolutely not saying that. You are amazing, unique individuals, and you're better than any robot. People engage when they know that you care, and they are less likely to overly read into your body language, your tone, your pattern, if they know you personally. So, what you all have said, one person has said, hey, we're in this environment where people telework. We don't always get to know people. So your number one job as a leader is influence, but it's getting to know your staff so they can feel engaged and supported. The only way that you can do that is if you get to know them personally. So when I said, my employee Baker, she didn't do empathy, she was very serious about that. Again, she came from a hierarchical structure, and I would say, hey, why don't you take your folks out to lunch? That was not in her wheelhouse. It was something that she didn't feel she needed to do as a leader because she believed in separating leadership from what she would consider to be her personal own time. Eventually, she came to the conclusion on her own that leadership was maybe not the best thing for her, given she didn't feel like she did empathy. So, in no way am I telling you all that you all have to be robots, because we need your uniqueness and we need your caring attitude. It's really just about being mindful and really understanding how, when you show up with your thoughts and feelings, how you put it out into the world. And every now and then, there is a misalignment that causes mixed messages. And so here are some of the things that impact. We receive feedback all of the time, but sometimes we just don't want to listen to it. And here are three of the reasons why we don't take feedback into account. The first one is, I know we don't use the word trigger, but the authors use that in their book, and that's why I have it there throughout this presentation. I should have explained that I separated the word or replaced the word trigger with what are your emotional cues? What are your challenges? What are the things that are your pet peeves? So some of you all, you may receive feedback and you just don't think it's the truth. We tell ourselves that's not accurate. If you have a personnel issue and you have an employee that is attacking your character because she's mad or he's mad that you're performancing managing her, sometimes you just say, hey, I heard this feedback from HR, but what she's or he's saying is not the truth. One of the things I will say in situations like this, when we don't believe in the the content, or we think that the feedback is wrong, unfair, or unhelpful, is that even if we can get 10% out of what the person is saying, because it's really about the person's perception is their reality. And so the question I always ask myself as a leader is, what can I do to be more effective? And I keep using personnel issues as an example because I truly believe that our job as a leader is to develop individuals to be high performing or to perform at a standard. That's number one. And then the second route is if they can't do it, then you have the responsibility of helping them understand that this may not be the job for them. There's two options, right? But in both situations, the goal is to treat people with respect. And so as you go along, the greatest compliment that you can receive as a leader is helping that person understand that this may not be the job for the individual. It's kind of like a police pulling you over and giving you a ticket and explaining why it was dangerous that you were speeding or you didn't turn on your blinker. Have you ever got a ticket and say, some of you never may have gotten a ticket and got a ticket and say, thank you, officer, for the ticket? That's really what it would look like in terms of your leadership. Relationship trigger. Some of you all are not going to listen to feedback from certain individuals because you don't trust the individual. For example, if you don't have a good relationship with your boss and your boss gives you feedback on 100 good things and 2 areas of improvement, all of us is going to go home and we're going to be stung by that 2 areas of improvement. But if you don't have a trusting relationship with the individual who gives you the feedback and you don't think they have your best interest at heart, you're more likely to disregard that feedback. And then finally, the identity feedback. I feel threatened about the feedback. So Baker, when she would receive this feedback, it would hurt her to the core because it was telling her something that was different, that in terms of comparing what she believed about herself and what others believed about her. And so she would at one time tell me things, and she would say, Sayori, the reason why they're giving you this negative feedback is because I'm holding them accountable for the work and no one has ever held them accountable. So now I'm put in this bad situation. And so the feedback was so strong and hurtful about kind of a feeling like an attack on her character and work ethic. She was not going to believe it to be true. So just make sure as you receive feedback that you don't fall into any of these traps in terms of not receiving the feedback. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do we bridge this gap? Use your reaction as a blind spot alert. So what does that mean? You get feedback, you're either going to respond or you're going to react. So the question really you have to ask yourself, why am I having a strong reaction? Is some of this may or may not be true, but something is going on with me emotionally that I am reacting. You also have to ask yourself, how are you getting in your own way? So when I say for leadership, our biggest challenge is we are our worst enemy. We either think something more negative about ourselves than what it is, or when I think about leadership, and let's say every now and then we all make mistakes or missteps. You may have sent that email too quick. You may have had an interaction with the individual that was not the most pleasant. When I talk about derailment of careers, it's not about the mistake, it's about the recovery. So how do you get in your own way? You know, we lose sleep at night. We don't just take the feedback for what it is. We just got to pay attention to how we're getting into our own way. And then look for your patterns. So I know under pressure, I want things presented in a certain way. I want things seen. I want to see things in a certain way. I want to see the data presented in a certain way. And so my leaky patterns leak out. So, what are your patterns when you are challenged, when you're feeling attacked, when you're feeling under pressure to get the project done, when you feel you're not moving things along? What does that look like in terms of your leadership? And then seek continuous feedback from multiple people. With that being said, someone said, I don't have a lot of people to receive feedback from. It's really about establishing those relationships. And again, for me, throughout my career, it was extremely important because I wanted to be the best leader that I could be. I'm trying to think, is there a different way to say that? Because that is the most important area. And the reason for that is because we're all unique individuals and we all have different approaches to how we do the work. And when I look at all of the challenges in your adults program, conflict is naturally going to rise because you guys are responsible for distributing the work, interpreting policy, but more importantly, you're responsible for working with a diverse group of people. And when that happens, conflict is going to arise. If you're on your own and you didn't manage people, you didn't have to work with people, you didn't have to work with the community, who cares about all this? Record yourself. What I said was, you can't see your face, you can't hear your tone, and sometimes you can't see your pattern. So for my individual baker, she would record the meetings, and she still struggled to understand why staff saw her in a negative way. Part of that, and the reason why she had difficulty progressing in her relationships with people, is because she wasn't going to change her thoughts and feelings about them. Her expectations, her values, how she moved projects along was embedded in who she was as a person at an early age. And she felt like everyone had to have the same standards. So for a week, she would do well, but under that pressure, she would revert back to King Baker. Focus on change from the inside out. And that's just what I explained, understand your thoughts and feelings, your values, your strengths. And for me, I knew my weaknesses. And so, I had a team of people around me. And I knew if there were areas that I was going to struggle, if I didn't want to start a meeting talking about data, then my team would start on different subjects because I knew the trap that I was going to fall into. And so focus on change from the inside out. Any questions at all?
There's nothing in the chat, so if you have questions, you can feel free to come off mute or add your question in the chat.
Sayori, thank you. I just have a quick thing to add. I thank you for recognizing kind of the nuance to some of this robot versus human as a leader part of it, because I have taken feedback earlier when I was a newer supervisor about how my tone sounded, or especially in email and things like that. And I overcorrected. And I did actually get feedback from someone at one point that said, you just don't seem human, or you don't seem like you understand how hard this is for us, or that, that the questioning my empathy, because I think I was overcorrecting, trying not to respond as much with the natural amount of emotion, I guess. And I think my leadership has definitely improved since I allowed myself to be more vulnerable
with my team, to be more genuine, but to recognize when I'm having an emotional response, to talk with them about theirs and to talk openly with mine in a, in a professional way. But I think that's when my leadership got better for me, and I felt like I had more employee engagement and more team building, and the culture of my team got more or got stronger when I wasn't trying to be this like a model for of always responding with just such a cool, calm, and collectedness, that it was okay to have some emotional response to something as soon as it was like pivoted towards solution focused, and it was focused towards the next steps or working together or those things. So so I just wanted to share that.
No, thank you for that. And sometimes the overcorrection is some people will say, I'm just not going to say anything. So if I'm offending people, then I'll just show up and I'm just not going to say anything. And so thank you for the comment of the correction and the balance that makes a difference. Next slide, please. So I provided within your domains information that we're not going to be able to talk about based on time. But if you are really looking in terms of improving your social and emotional intelligence, I absolutely believe in these 4 domains. And so I'm hoping that as you move your leadership growth forward, you take the time out and say, what does self-management look like? Emotional control, adaptability, achievement orientation, and positive outlook. Next slide. So those are the competencies of self-management to regulate your behaviors. And then as a leader, how do you develop that habit of emotional regulation, resilience, and intentional action? Why I think self-management is so important in your space as leaders, because you're expected to show up and be a certain kind of way. It's important that you're vulnerable, but at the same time, as a leader, they say, hey, keep those emotions in check because you're there to lead a team. So my question always is in your environment, who takes care of you as the leader? Because you're always expected to take care of other folks. And so there are certain things that you can do in terms of, how do you manage in this environment of all of the challenges you face? So it's really about going back and understanding, first of all, self-awareness, what are the things that, what are your emotional cues? Do you understand your physiological responses, that fight, flight, flee, fawn? How do you label your emotion? And then are you responding or reacting? And so this slide will just help you just look at some of the things that you should pay attention to. And I think what's important is paying attention to that self-talk. You have to give yourself grace. And that's where I started. Give yourself grace. And then just understand are you paying attention as a leader on, what are the most important things that you should be paying attention to and not engaging in time wasters, given all that you have to do. But sometimes it's difficult to fall in the trap given all of your challenges. Next slide, please. And then you have social awareness, and that's empathy. And empathy, again, is probably one of the most, I'm going to say, I got to be careful with that because I think they're all important. But what we just talked about is in this environment where you don't really get to know people that are teleworking, the question really is how do you put yourself in the shoes of the people that work for you? How do you understand their feelings and perspectives? And how do you respond appropriately when you don't get to know them? And then importantly, in terms of this political environment, are you aware of, what is the organizational culture? Some people don't feel like they can always be free to speak up. And what I tell people as leaders, you pick and choose your battles. There are things that are so important to you in terms of your values, but your organizational culture is not going to allow you to speak up. But do you schedule a private meeting with the person? How do you do it? And so it's important to understand, what does my organization look like? And what are some of the things that I can do to be effective? And how do I maneuver appropriately? But just know you're not in this work alone. And then the final is relationship management. And this is where I will spend the remainder of our short time together. Next slide, please. Next. So here, again, these are some of the things that you can look at as a leader. How can I transcend my perspective so I can understand and value others? And this slide just gives a couple of tips. Next slide. Relationship management, the ability to use your understanding of your own emotions and those of others to effectively navigate interactions, build strong connections, manage conflict, and maintain positive relationships with people around you. For me, I'm going to go back to if we can do this right as a society, as a community, as an organization, we all win. We have to be a respecter of people. It is extremely important in order for us to thrive. And again, what I will say again is in your adult protective services world, you rely on relationships with the hospital in terms of placements and discharge planning. You rely on your policy people, you rely on your admin people, you rely on your colleagues in order to figure out ways how you can effectively be innovative and increase your resources that you have available to serve the community. Relationship management is so important because your number one role is your staff and removing barriers. Your role is to influence them in a positive direction to meet the mission, visions, and goals of the organization. Relationship management is so important in terms of influence because you are going to have hard conversations with people, particularly your staff, because none of us are important. I mean, important, that's a wrong word. None of us is perfect or perfect. And so, how do you influence people? What is your sphere of influence? And so, when we think also about organizational politics, really, we see it as a negative thing based on what's going on, in our divided country without getting into politics. But really, politics is really about politics exist in families. Politics exist everywhere we go. But the question is how do we influence people in a positive direction? Do you serve as a coach and a mentor for your staff? Do people come to you and ask you to coach and mentor them? It's extremely important. What does teamwork look like? Are you building a highly effective team and does psychological safety exist? Conflict management. What is your preference as it relates to conflict? So what I told you about myself is I have a very direct style of communicating. And one of the things as a measurement of my success is, am I doing more harm than good as it relates to conflict management? So I have two people, they don't get along, they're arguing, I bring them together. Did it result in anything good or did it result in anything bad? And the thing about this is people will say, I do conflict well. But when we look at research, people have preferences in terms of the style that they defer to based on their preference of working through conflict? And then finally, do you inspire your teams to move toward a shared vision? Is what your responsibility is as a leader. And so I'm going to say it again, is if we all can manage relationships with one another and we respect one another for the diverse things that we bring to the table, we all win as a society. And so with that said, I just truly, Don, again, you all have a top-notch organization. And I want to thank you. I want to thank our participants today for taking this time to grow their leadership. And I wish you all the best. And you really are doing the work. You're doing God's work. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sayori. So we now are moving into the question and answer portion of the workshop. What questions do you have for Sayori? We've got about 15 minutes for questions, 15, 20 minutes.
And